The moment Marcus Thornton, CEO of Thornton Industries, net worth somewhere north of $400 million, wrapped his arms around me in front of 200 guests, I watched my step-family's faces collapse like a building demolition in slow motion. My stepmother Vivian had just spent 45 minutes introducing me to distant relatives as the help we brought to manage the catering situation. My stepbrother Derek had handed me his empty champagne glass and said, "Be a dear and fetch me another, would you?" My stepsister Camille had actually snapped her fingers at me. Snapped her fingers. And now here was Marcus Thornton, one of the most powerful men in the Pacific Northwest, holding me like I was his long-lost daughter. Because I was. Before I continue, you need to understand something. This wasn't some dramatic coincidence. This wasn't fate swooping in to save me at the last second. I had planned this moment for 11 months. Every detail, every guest, every second of humiliation I endured that day was calculated. They thought they were embarrassing me. I was documenting them. "Eleanor," Marcus said, pulling back to look at me with tears in his eyes. "I'm so sorry it took this long." The grand ballroom of the Thornton estate, yes, the estate that shared his name, went silent. 200 people who had watched my step-family treat me like garbage suddenly couldn't find their voices. Vivian's champagne glass slipped from her fingers. It didn't break. It just bounced on the carpet, rolling in a sad little circle while Dom Perignon soaked into the imported wool. I don't understand," she stammered, her face the color of old newspaper. "Eleanor, what is this? Who is this man?" I smiled. 11 months of smiling through their cruelty had prepared me for this smile. "Vivian," I said, my voice carrying across the silent room, "I'd like you to meet my biological father, the man whose estate you're currently standing in, the man whose charity foundation funded this reunion, the man who owns the company where Derek has been begging for a job for the past 3 years." I paused. "The man whose family you've been trying to infiltrate since you married my father 22 years ago." Derek's face went from confusion to recognition to absolute terror in about 4 seconds. "Wait," he said. "Wait. The Thornton Foundation. The one that's been reviewing your loan applications?" "Yes." I tilted my head. "How's that going, by the way?" Camille grabbed her mother's arm. Mom, what is she talking about?" But Vivian wasn't looking at Camille. She was looking at me. Really looking at me. Maybe for the first time in 2 decades. And I watched understanding dawn in her eyes. I had never been the victim. I had been the trap. That's when I realized something I should have understood years ago. The people who underestimate you are handing you a weapon. They're telling you exactly where they're vulnerable. For 22 years, my step-family had treated me like I was invisible, like I was nothing, like I was the janitor at my own father's funeral. They had no idea that every slight, every insult, every moment of cruelty had been recorded, documented, filed away in folders that were now sitting in the offices of 3 different attorneys. They had no idea that I had spent the last 11 months building a case so airtight that their lives were about to implode in ways they couldn't even imagine. And they had absolutely no idea that the woman they'd been dismissing as the help was about to inherit more money than they would see in 10 lifetimes. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning, back to the day my father died, and I discovered that nothing in my life had been what I thought it was. Back to the day I found the letter that changed everything. My name is Eleanor Marie Ashford. I'm 34 years old. I have a master's degree in forensic accounting from the University of Washington, and for the past 8 years, I've worked as a fraud investigator for a mid-sized firm in Seattle called Whitmore and Associates. I tell you this not to brag, but so you understand. I know how to follow money. I know how to read documents. I know how to find the things people try to hide. I've built my entire career on uncovering what others want to keep buried. These skills would become very important. My biological mother died when I was 2. Ovarian cancer. Fast, brutal, final. I have 3 photographs of her and a locket that my father said she wore every day. That's it. That's all I have of the woman who gave me life. I used to hold that locket at night when I was a child, pressing it against my chest and trying to imagine what she looked like beyond those 3 faded photographs. What her voice sounded like, what her laugh was like, whether she would have protected me from what was coming. My father, Richard Ashford, remarried when I was 12. He had been alone for a decade, and I think the loneliness finally broke him. He met Vivian Crawford at a charity gala. She was working the room like a professional, beautiful and charming and utterly magnetic. She came with 2 children from her previous marriage, Derek, who was 14, and Camille, who was 10. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs immediately. The way Vivian's eyes would go flat when my father mentioned my mother. The way her smile would freeze just slightly, like a glitch in an otherwise perfect performance. The way Derek would accidentally break my things and then claim I was lying about it. My favorite music box, my collection of glass animals, a porcelain figure my grandmother had given me before she died. "Eleanor's making things up again," he would say, with that innocent expression he had perfected. I didn't touch her stuff. The way Camille learned, even at 10 years old, to smile at my father while cutting me down behind his back. "Eleanor said something really mean to me today," she would whisper to Vivian, loud enough for my father to hear. "I don't know why she hates me so much." She never specified what I had said. She never had to. The accusation was enough. But I was 12. I wanted a family. I wanted to believe that this could work, that we could become something real, that the empty space my mother left could finally be filled. So I believed. For 22 years, I lived in that house as the perpetual outsider, the one who didn't quite fit, the one who was tolerated but never welcomed, the one who learned to make herself small, quiet, invisible, because invisible meant safe. My father loved me. I know he did. But he was also a man who hated conflict. A man who would rather look away than confront the ugliness growing in his own home. He would take me aside after particularly bad incidents and say, "Eleanor, please, just try to get along. For me." And I would try. God, I would try so hard. I tried when Vivian forgot to include me in the family Christmas card 3 years in a row. "Oh, Eleanor, I'm so sorry. The photographer only had room for 4 people in the frame. We'll get a separate one of you next time." Next time never came. I tried when Derek told all his friends I was the charity case his mom took in. I overheard them laughing about it at his birthday party, a party I hadn't been invited to attend, but had been asked to help set up. "Yeah, she's not even really family. Just some random kid my stepdad had with his dead wife." I didn't tell my father. What would have been the point? I tried when Camille excluded me from her wedding party because I would throw off the aesthetic. She had 6 bridesmaids, 6, but apparently there wasn't room for her stepsister. It's nothing personal, Eleanor. I just have a very specific vision. I tried, and I tried, and I tried. And then my father died. It was a heart attack. Sudden, no warning. One morning he was making breakfast, humming some old song from the 70s, something by Simon and Garfunkel, I think. And by lunchtime he was gone. I got the call at work. Vivian's voice, strangely calm. "Eleanor, there's been an accident. Your father collapsed this morning. He's at Swedish Medical Center." By the time I got there, he was already dead. The doctor said it was massive, instant. He probably didn't even feel it. They said these things as if they were supposed to be comforting, as if instant somehow made it better, as if not feeling it erased the fact that he was gone. I was 33 years old, and I felt like I was 12 again. Lost. Alone. The only person who had ever truly loved me was gone. I sat in that hospital waiting room for 2 hours, just staring at the wall. A nurse brought me water. A chaplain offered to pray with me. Vivian, Derek, and Camille arrived together, already dressed in coordinated black, already presenting a united front of grief. "Poor Richard," Vivian said, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief that looked brand new. "He worked so hard. I always told him to slow down, but he never listened." She didn't look at me. Not once. The funeral was 3 days later. I arrived early to help with the arrangements, or so I thought. But when I walked into my childhood home, Vivian was already there with a woman I didn't recognize. They were sitting at the dining room table, papers spread out between them, speaking in low voices that stopped the moment I entered. "Oh, Eleanor," Vivian said, barely glancing up. "Good. We need someone to organize the catering deliveries. The staging area is in the garage." I blinked. "I'm sorry?" "The catering, the deliveries. There are about 15 different vendors arriving throughout the day, and someone needs to check them in, verify the orders, make sure nothing's missing. The logistics are quite complicated. My father's body wasn't even in the ground yet, and she was asking me to manage catering deliveries." "Vivian," I said slowly, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm his daughter. I thought I would be involved in the ceremony, the planning. I have things I want to say." "You thought you would what?" She finally looked at me, and there was something in her eyes I'd never quite seen before. Something cold, something triumphant. "Derek is giving the eulogy. He's been working on it all week. Camille is greeting guests and managing the guest book. I'm handling estate matters with our attorney." She gestured to the woman beside her, who gave me a thin smile. "We all have our roles, Eleanor. This is yours." That was the first anomaly. I stood there, frozen, feeling something shift inside me. Something I couldn't quite name yet, but something important. 22 years of swallowing my pride. 22 years of making myself small. 22 years of trying to keep the peace. And this was where it had gotten me. My father was dead, and I was being sent to the garage. I should have fought her. I should have said something. But my father was dead, and I was drowning. And I didn't have the strength for a battle I knew I couldn't win. So I managed the catering deliveries. I stood in the garage of my childhood home, checking boxes against invoices while 200 people filed into the living room to mourn my father. I listened through the walls as Derek gave a eulogy full of stories I didn't recognize. Stories that made him sound like a devoted son when I knew for a fact he'd barely spoken to my father in the past 5 years. "Richard taught me what it means to be a man," Derek said, his voice carrying through the thin walls. "He showed me integrity, honor, the importance of putting family first." I thought about the time Derek had asked my father for $50,000 to invest in a business opportunity and then lost it all gambling. I thought about the screaming fight they'd had afterward, the words that were said, the months of silence that followed. I heard Camille cry beautiful, practiced tears as she talked about losing her daddy. He wasn't her daddy. He was mine. But nobody seemed to remember that. When the service ended, I emerged from the garage, still clutching my clipboard. Guests were milling about, eating the food I had checked in, drinking the wine I had organized. A few people glanced at me with mild curiosity. Who was this woman with the clipboard? But no one approached. I was invisible, just like always. The second anomaly came the next day. Vivian called a family meeting to discuss estate matters. She was very specific about the time, 2 p.m. sharp, and the location, the formal dining room, where important discussions happened. I assumed this meant the reading of the will, or at least a discussion about my father's wishes. I was wrong. When I arrived, Vivian was already seated at the head of the table, my father's seat. She had rearranged the chairs so that Derek sat at her right hand and Camille at her left. The chair left for me was at the far end, as distant from the head as possible without being in another room entirely. I sat down without commenting. Richard's attorney will be handling the formal reading next week, Vivian said, shuffling some papers importantly. But I wanted to discuss some immediate concerns with the family. What concerns? I asked. Derek snorted. The house, obviously. Mom needs to stay here. She can't exactly be expected to move at a time like this. I wasn't suggesting she move, I said carefully. I just want to know what Dad's wishes were. The three of them exchanged a look. That look. The one I'd seen 1,000 times growing up. The one that said, she doesn't belong here. She's not really family. Why is she even part of this conversation? Richard's wishes, Vivian said, her voice taking on that patient, condescending tone she used when she was about to say something cutting, were primarily focused on taking care of me, as his wife, of over 2 decades. She emphasized those last words deliberately. He was my father, I said, and he was my husband for 22 years. I think I know what he wanted, Eleanor. We discussed these things. We planned together. We had a partnership. I didn't respond. I just watched her. Really watched her, in a way I hadn't allowed myself to do in years. And for the first time, I really saw her. 22 years. 22 years of living in this woman's shadow. 22 years of being told I was the problem, I was the difficult one, I needed to try harder. And now my father was dead, and she was already circling the assets like a vulture. That's when I noticed it. There was a folder on the table in front of her. Thick, official-looking. Most of the contents were hidden, but the edge of one document was visible, and I could see a letterhead that made my heart skip. Thornton Industries. Why would Vivian have documents from Thornton Industries? The company was one of the largest in Seattle. Marcus Thornton was regularly featured in business magazines. His foundation supported half the charities in the Pacific Northwest. What possible connection could my stepmother have to that world? I didn't ask. I didn't react at all. I just filed that information away and kept my face perfectly neutral. I was starting to understand something. Whatever was happening here, it was bigger than a family disagreement. Over the next few days, I watched Vivian carefully. She was busy, phones calls behind closed doors, meetings with people I didn't recognize, papers that disappeared into her office whenever I walked by. She was planning something, coordinating something, working towards some goal I couldn't quite identify. And she was careful to keep me out of it. Eleanor, could you handle the thank you notes for the flowers? There were so many, and I simply don't have time. Eleanor, the caterers are coming to pick up their equipment. Could you supervise? Eleanor, some of your father's old colleagues want to stop by with condolences. Could you be here to let them in? I have an appointment I can't miss. Every task she assigned me was menial, time-consuming, designed to keep me occupied and out of the way. In my experience, people only work that hard to hide something when that something is worth hiding. So I started paying closer attention. I noticed that Vivian's appointments always seemed to be with the same few people. A man in an expensive suit who drove a black Mercedes, a woman with a briefcase who never smiled, and occasionally, someone who looked like a private investigator. Khaki jacket, watchful eyes, notepad always at the ready. I noticed that Derek was suddenly very interested in financial matters. He kept asking Vivian about the accounts and the portfolio and the timeline. Questions that didn't make sense for a man who had always seemed allergic to work. And I noticed that Camille was watching me, constantly. Whenever I was in the room, her eyes would track my movements. When I spoke, she would study my face with an intensity that felt almost predatory. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. I stayed calm. I needed evidence. The formal reading of the will took place 8 days after the funeral. We gathered in the office of my father's attorney, a man named Bernard Huang, who had handled our family's legal matters for as long as I could remember. He was in his 60s, with kind eyes and a habit of cleaning his glasses when he was nervous. He was cleaning his glasses a lot that day. The office was small but elegant. Dark wood, leather chairs, the kind of law books that looked like they had actually been read rather than just displayed. Bernard sat behind his desk while the four of us arranged ourselves in a semicircle of chairs facing him. Vivian had positioned herself in the center, naturally. Derek and Camille flanked her. I sat slightly apart, as always. "Before we begin," Bernard said, putting his glasses back on and then immediately taking them off again to polish them further. "I want to make sure everyone understands the situation. Richard came to me 8 months ago to make changes to his will. Significant changes." Vivian's expression flickered. Just slightly. Just for a moment. Well, what kind of changes? That's what we're here to discuss. He cleared his throat, picked up a document from his desk, and began reading. The first several pages were standard bequests. Some money to charity, the American Cancer Society, a scholarship fund at the University of Washington, a local hospice where my grandmother had spent her final days, a few personal items to old friends, a watch to his college roommate, a first-edition book to a former business partner, his golf clubs to a man who had taught him to play 40 years ago. Nothing unexpected, nothing that raised any flags. Then we got to the section about the house. "The primary residence," Bernard read, his voice carefully neutral, "located at 4521 Evergreen Lane, Seattle, Washington, is to be held in trust for the benefit of my wife, Vivian Crawford Ashford, for the duration of her lifetime, or until she remarries, whichever comes first." Vivian relaxed slightly. Derek and Camille exchanged satisfied looks. "Upon the termination of said trust," Bernard continued, "whether by death, remarriage, or any other circumstance specified herein, the property shall pass in its entirety to my daughter, Eleanor Marie Ashford." The satisfied looks vanished. "What?" Derek sat forward so quickly his chair scraped against the floor. "That can't be right." Bernard didn't respond. He just kept reading. "My investment accounts, totaling approximately $2.3 million at the time of this writing, shall be divided as follows. 50% to Eleanor Marie Ashford, 25% to Vivian Crawford Ashford, 12.5% to Derek Crawford, and 12.5% to Camille Crawford." Vivian's face went white. That's not... Richard never told me. There is also a life insurance policy in the amount of $500,000, Bernard continued, which shall be paid in full to Eleanor Marie Ashford as the named beneficiary. Silence. Complete and absolute silence. I sat very still, trying to process what I was hearing. Half the investments, the life insurance, the house eventually. My father had left me everything that mattered, and he hadn't told anyone. There's more, Bernard said, and now he was definitely nervous. His glasses were getting the cleaning of their life. There is also a letter to be delivered to Eleanor specifically. Richard was very clear that this letter was to be given to her in private after the main reading was complete. He looked at me. Ms. Ashford, if you wouldn't mind staying after the others leave? The next 20 minutes were chaos. Vivian demanded to see the original documents. She wanted independent verification. She wanted to know when exactly these changes had been made and why she hadn't been consulted. This is highly irregular, she said, her voice climbing. Richard and I discussed his estate planning extensively. We agreed that the house would go to me outright. We agreed that the investments would be divided equally among all 4 children. He can't have changed that without telling me. These are the documents Richard filed with this office 8 months ago, Bernard said calmly. They were properly witnessed, notarized, and executed according to Washington state law. They supersede any previous versions. 8 months ago? That was after his heart problems started. He wasn't thinking clearly. He was on medication. This clearly reflects a diminished mental capacity. I can assure you that Mr. Ashford was fully competent when he made these changes. The documents include a physician's certification of mental capacity, which he requested specifically to prevent any such challenges. That stopped Vivian cold. My father had anticipated exactly this argument, and he had prepared for it. Smart man. I had underestimated him. Derek jumped in next, his face red with anger. This is Eleanor's doing. She manipulated him. She must have poisoned him against us while he was sick and vulnerable. I hadn't seen him in 3 months before he died, I said quietly. I was working a case in Portland. We talked on the phone once a week, but I wasn't anywhere near him when he made these changes. You're lying. I have phone records, travel receipts, and expense reports from my firm that document every day of those 3 months. I can produce them if you'd like. Derek's mouth opened and closed. He had no response to evidence. Camille tried a different approach. The tears came first. Perfect crystalline tears that caught the light just so. Bernard, this is so hard for all of us. We've just lost our father. And now to learn that he would do this to Mom. Richard loved you all, Bernard said, not unkindly. These allocations are designed to ensure everyone is taken care of. Vivian has the use of the house for life. Derek and Camille each receive a substantial inheritance. No one is being left with nothing. But Eleanor gets more, Camille said, dropping the tears as quickly as she had summoned them. She gets more than all of us combined. She is Richard's biological daughter, and she is the named beneficiary of documents that Richard prepared with full mental capacity and clear intention. That is the law. Vivian stood up abruptly. We'll contest this. I'll have my own attorneys review everything. This isn't over. That is your right, Bernard said. But I should warn you that Richard anticipated a challenge. He left specific provisions for that eventuality, including evidence of his mental state, video testimony recorded before a witness, and several notarized statements from medical professionals. Any challenge will be difficult to win and expensive to pursue. My father had thought of everything. Vivian swept out of the office without another word. Derek and Camille followed, shooting me looks of pure hatred. I stayed in my chair. The door closed. And finally, Bernard and I were alone. "Ms. Ashford," he said, and now his voice was different. Softer, more careful. "Your father gave me very specific instructions about this letter. He said you would understand once you read it. He said it would explain everything." He handed me an envelope, heavy cream paper. My father's handwriting on the front. "For Eleanor, for when you're ready to know the truth." I stared at those words for a long moment. My father had never written me a letter before, not once in my entire life. He was a phone call person, a quick text person, a let's grab coffee and talk person. A letter was something else entirely. A letter was deliberate, permanent, important. I opened it, and my entire world shifted on its axis. The letter was 6 pages long, handwritten in my father's careful script, dated 8 months before his death. I'm going to share the relevant parts with you, because you need to understand what I learned that day. You need to understand why everything that came after was necessary. Here's what my father wrote. "My dearest Eleanor, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry for so many things. For letting Vivian treat you the way she did. For not being stronger. For not protecting you the way a father should protect his daughter. For keeping this secret for so long, but mostly, I'm sorry that I wasn't your real father." I had to read that line 3 times before it made sense. The words were clear, the meaning was unmistakable. But my brain refused to process them. Richard Ashford, the man who had raised me, loved me, been my only stable presence for 33 years, was telling me he wasn't my father. How was that possible? I kept reading. "Your mother, Sarah, and I met when we were both young and stupid and thought we knew everything about love. We got married too fast. We realized our mistake within a year. But by then, she was already pregnant with you. We tried to make it work. We really did. But Sarah was in love with someone else. Someone she'd met before me. Someone she'd never stopped loving. A man named Marcus Thornton." I stopped breathing. Marcus Thornton, the CEO of Thornton Industries. The man whose documents I had seen in Vivian's folder. "Marcus Thornton is your biological father, Eleanor. Sarah and I divorced when you were 6 months old, but we agreed to keep the truth secret. Marcus was just starting to build his company back then. Thornton Industries was barely a startup. Sarah didn't want anything from him. She just wanted to raise you in peace, away from complications. Then she got sick. Cancer. Fast, brutal, unforgiving. She was gone within 4 months of the diagnosis. You were 2 years old. I could have told Marcus then. I should have. But I loved you, Eleanor. I had raised you for 2 years, and you were my daughter in every way that mattered. I was terrified that if Marcus knew, he would take you away from me. So I kept the secret. For 32 years, I kept the secret. But things have changed. I've been watching Vivian very carefully these past few years, and I've seen things that worry me. She's been making inquiries, hiring investigators. I think she's discovered the connection between your mother and Marcus Thornton. I think she's planning something. Eleanor, you need to be very careful. Vivian married me because she believed there was Thornton money somewhere in my past. She's been waiting 22 years to find it. She doesn't know that the money isn't mine. It's yours. Marcus Thornton has been searching for you for years. He didn't know you existed until Sarah's sister told him the truth about 2 years ago, when she was diagnosed with dementia and wanted to clear her conscience. He's been trying to find you ever since. I've included his contact information at the end of this letter. Call him, Eleanor. Let him tell you his side of the story. Let him help you understand. And please, please be careful of Vivian. She's not what she seems. She never was. I love you. I always have. I always will. Even though I wasn't your biological father, you were always my daughter. Nothing will ever change that. Richard, at the bottom of the letter was a phone number, a Seattle area code, and beneath it, a postscript, P.S. I've also left something else for you, a box. Bernard has been instructed to give it to you privately. It contains evidence, Eleanor, documentation of Vivian's activities over the years. I was never brave enough to confront her with it, but perhaps you will be. Use it wisely, and trust no one except Marcus. He's a good man. He deserved to know you. I sat in Bernard's office for a long time after I finished reading. I don't know how long, an hour, maybe, 2. The world I thought I knew had crumbled. The man I called father wasn't my father. The woman who had raised me had been planning to use me all along, and somewhere out there was a billionaire CEO who had been searching for me for years. It felt like a dream, a fever dream, something that couldn't possibly be real. Finally, Bernard spoke. Ms. Ashford? Eleanor? Are you all right? I looked up at him. Did you know? About Marcus Thornton? He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Your father told me some of it. Not all, but enough to understand the importance of this letter. And you didn't think to mention this before the reading? Richard was very specific. He wanted you to hear it from him, not from me. He wanted his words, not mine. He felt he owed you that much. I nodded slowly. That made sense. That was exactly like my father. Like Richard. Even in death, he was trying to protect me. Trying to soften the blow. There's one more thing, Bernard said. He stood up and walked to a safe in the corner of his office. The combination took him a moment. His hands were shaking slightly, but finally the door swung open. He withdrew a small lockbox and placed it on the desk between us. Richard left this for you. He said it contained evidence, documentation of some of Vivian's activities over the years. I stared at the box. It was maybe 12 inches long, 8 inches wide. Ordinary looking, the kind of lockbox you could buy at any office supply store. He said you would know what to do with it. I reached out and took the box. It was heavier than it looked. Thank you, Bernard. Ms. Ashford, Eleanor, I want you to know that whatever happens next, I believe your father was trying to protect you. He loved you very much. I saw it every time he came to this office. Every time he talked about you, his whole face would change. You were his greatest pride. I felt tears prick at my eyes, but I blinked them back. There would be time for tears later. Right now, I needed to focus. What's the combination for this lock? Your birthday, month, day, year. Of course it was. I walked out of Bernard's office with a lockbox full of evidence and a phone number that would change my life. I didn't call Marcus Thornton that day. I wasn't ready. Instead, I went home to my apartment and opened the lockbox. And what I found made my stomach drop. The box contained 47 documents. I spread them across my kitchen table, sorting them by date, by type, by subject. Bank statements, property records, email printouts, photographs, invoice copies, receipts, handwritten notes in Richard's careful script, documenting conversations, observations, suspicions. 47 pieces of evidence that my father had collected over years, perhaps even decades, documenting what he had discovered about Vivian's true intentions. Let me tell you what those documents revealed. Document number 1. Private investigator invoice, dated 2012. Vivian had hired a private investigator named Gerald Foster, the name that would come to haunt me, to research Sarah Ashford's background. The invoice listed specific tasks: background verification, family history, financial connections, relationship history prior to marriage. She had been digging into my biological mother's past for over a decade. Document number 2. Email printout, dated 2014, an email from Gerald Foster to Vivian. Subject line, Thornton connection confirmed. Mrs. Ashford, per your request, I've completed the background investigation on Sarah Ashford, née Sarah Mitchell. I can confirm that Ms. Mitchell was in a serious relationship with Marcus Thornton during the period of 1988 to 1989. The relationship ended approximately 6 months before her marriage to Richard Ashford. Interestingly, the timeline suggests the possibility that Ms. Mitchell was pregnant when she married Mr. Ashford. I can investigate further if you wish. Gerald Foster. She had known. For at least 10 years, Vivian had known that there might be a connection between me and Marcus Thornton. Document number 3. Bank statement, dated 2015. A statement from an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, registered to a shell company called Crawford Holdings, LLC. The statement showed regular deposits from Vivian's personal accounts, totaling over $200,000. Crawford, her maiden name. She had been hiding money for years. Document number 4. Wire transfer receipt, dated 2016. A wire transfer of $50,000 from Crawford Holdings, LLC, to Foster Consulting Services. The memo line read, Phase 2 investigation. She wasn't just researching me. She was building something, planning something. Documents number 5 to 12. More invoices, more emails, more transfers. A paper trail stretching back nearly 15 years, documenting Vivian's obsessive investigation into the Thornton connection. She had paid for record searches, bribed hospital administrators for access to my mother's medical files, hired surveillance teams to track my movements, and cultivated contacts inside Thornton Industries. The scope was staggering. The patience was terrifying. She had been waiting. For 15 years, she had been waiting. Document number 13. Property records. Dated 2018. These made my blood run cold. Vivian had put a lien on the family home, my father's home, without his knowledge. The signature on the documents looked like his, but Richard had included a note. This is not my signature. Compared to known samples, V has committed forgery. He was right. I pulled up the will documents that Bernard had given me, compared the signatures, and saw immediately what Richard had seen. The signature on the property documents was close, but wrong. The R was too narrow. The A was too sharp. Vivian had forged my father's signature to secure debt against his own home. Documents number 14 to 23. Bank statements from household accounts. Over the course of 20 years, Vivian had funneled approximately $340,000 from my father's accounts to her personal holdings. The transfers were disguised as household expenses, medical bills, education costs for Derek and Camille. Small amounts, carefully hidden, spread out over decades. But they added up. Document number 24. Photograph A surveillance photo of Vivian meeting with a man I didn't recognize. They were sitting in a cafe, heads close together, papers spread between them. Richard's note on the back. V meeting with unknown man, downtown Seattle, March 2019. Third meeting this month. No explanation given when asked. Documents numbers 25 to 30. Emails between Vivian and Gerald Foster. A correspondence that painted a disturbing picture. The target continues to work at the accounting firm. No apparent awareness of her connection to Thornton. Recommend maintaining surveillance, but no direct action at this time. The subject's trust in family remains intact. This is an asset we can leverage when the time is right. G. The target. That was me. They had been watching me for years, monitoring my life, my work, my relationships, waiting for the right moment to strike. Document number 31. Email from an unknown sender to Gerald Foster. Gerald, our contact at Thornton Industries, confirms that Marcus Thornton has intensified his search for the daughter. He's hired additional investigators. We estimate he'll make contact within 6 to 12 months if we don't act first. Recommend accelerating the timeline. Mrs. Ashford should position herself as the concerned stepmother before Thornton makes contact. If the daughter discovers the truth independently, we lose control of the introduction. V. Vincent? Vivian? Someone else entirely? The message was clear regardless. They were planning to manage my relationship with Marcus Thornton. They wanted to control the introduction, position Vivian as an essential intermediary, and presumably extract financial benefits from the arrangement. Documents number 32 to 38. Derek's financial records. Richard had somehow obtained copies of Derek's loan applications, all 3 of them. Each one was fraudulent. False asset declarations, fake references, fabricated employment history. Derek had been applying for loans using information that simply wasn't true, and the amounts weren't small. $200,000, $500,000, $750,000. Bank fraud. Federal bank fraud. Documents number 39 to 45. Camille's communications text messages, captured by some means I didn't want to think about. Conversations between Camille and her husband about getting Mom to share more of the Ashford money before Eleanor figures out what's happening. Between Camille and Derek about keeping Eleanor busy so she doesn't notice anything. Between Camille and an unsaved number about reporting on the target's emotional state. Camille had been spying on me for years. She had been reporting my movements, my moods, my relationships to someone, presumably Gerald Foster or Vivian or both. Every moment of apparent kindness had been surveillance. Document number 46. A contract. This was the most damning piece of all. A contract between Vivian Crawford and Gerald Foster dated 3 years ago. A contract in which Vivian agreed to pay Gerald $500,000, contingent on the successful acquisition and management of Thornton-related assets through the subject Eleanor Ashford. The language was carefully legal, carefully vague, but the meaning was unmistakable. Vivian had hired Gerald to help her take control of whatever inheritance I might receive from Marcus Thornton. They were planning to use me to access the Thornton fortune. Document number 47. Richard's final note. A handwritten letter, clearly written shortly before his death. Eleanor, if you've found this box, then you've also found the letter. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you all of this in person. I was afraid of Vivian, afraid of losing you, afraid of what the truth might do to our family. But I was wrong to be afraid. Fear kept me silent for too long. Fear let Vivian do what she did. Fear made me complicit in my own family's destruction. You deserve to know the truth. You deserve to be free. I know this is a lot to process. I know you'll be angry at me, at Vivian, at the whole situation. You have every right to be. But please, Eleanor, don't let anger make you reckless. Vivian is dangerous. She's been planning this for years, and she has resources you don't know about. If you're going to fight her, you need to be smart. Gather your evidence, build your case, find allies you can trust, and call Marcus Thornton. Whatever you think of him, whatever you think of me, he deserves to know the truth, and you deserve to know your real father. I love you. Richard, I sat with those documents until 3 a.m., reading and rereading, organizing and analyzing. My forensic accounting brain cataloged everything, noted connections, identified patterns. But my heart just ached. 22 years. 22 years of being treated as the outsider, the burden, the problem. And the whole time, they had been planning to exploit me. I didn't call Marcus Thornton the next day either. I needed time to process, time to think, time to figure out my next move. I threw myself into my work at Whitmore and Associates, taking on extra cases, burying myself in other people's financial crimes. It was easier than thinking about my own, but I couldn't avoid it forever. 2 weeks after the funeral, I found myself standing outside a coffee shop in Bellevue, heart pounding, phone in hand. I dialed the number from my father's letter. It rang 3 times. "Hello?" A man's voice. Deep, cautious. "My name is Eleanor Ashford," I said. "I believe you've been looking for me." There was a long pause. I could hear breathing on the other end, could almost feel the shock reverberating through the connection. "Eleanor," Marcus Thornton said, and his voice cracked. "Oh my God, Eleanor. I thought I'd never find you." We agreed to meet that afternoon. Same coffee shop, 3 p.m., public space, neutral ground. I arrived early and chose a table in the corner, where I could watch the door. I had looked up Marcus Thornton online, seen dozens of photos from business events and charity galas. I knew what he looked like, but nothing prepared me for the moment he walked through that door. He was tall, silver-haired, distinguished in the way that very wealthy men often are. Good tailoring, good posture, good skin care. But that wasn't what struck me. What struck me was that he looked like me. The same eyes, deep brown, slightly almond-shaped, with that distinctive downward tilt at the outer corners that I had always thought made me look sad. The same nose, straight, a little too long, with a slight bump at the bridge that I had considered getting fixed a dozen times. The same slight asymmetry in the jawline that I had always thought made me look wrong somehow. I didn't look wrong. I looked like my father, my real father. He spotted me immediately. Our eyes met across the room, and I watched recognition dawn on his face. He crossed to my table with long strides, and for a moment, he just stood there, looking at me. "Eleanor." His voice was barely above a whisper. "You're so beautiful. You look just like Sarah." "I have her locket," I said. "It's the only thing I have of hers." He sat down across from me, and for a long moment neither of us spoke. We just looked at each other, filling in 33 years of absence with silent observation. I noticed that his hands were trembling slightly, that there were tears in his eyes, that he kept opening his mouth to speak and then closing it again, as if he couldn't find the words. Finally, he said, "I need you to know that I didn't abandon you. I didn't know you existed until 2 years ago. Sarah's sister finally told me the truth when she was diagnosed with dementia. I think she wanted to clear her conscience before she lost her mind. I know. I read my father's letter, Richard's letter. Richard was a good man. He raised you well. I can see that." "He was a good man," I agreed. "But he wasn't strong enough to protect me from Vivian." Marcus's expression darkened. "Tell me about Vivian." So I did. I told him everything. The years of mistreatment, The exclusion and the humiliation. The way I had been made to feel like a burden in my own home. The funeral, where I was sent to manage catering deliveries while others mourned my father. And then I showed him the documents from the lockbox. He read through them in silence, his face growing harder with each page. I watched him process the bank statements, the emails, the contract with Gerald Foster. I watched understanding dawn, then anger, then something cold and calculating. "She hired investigators," he said finally. "She's been tracking my search for you for at least 15 years. And this Gerald Foster," he tapped the contract. "I know that name. He's been trying to get meetings with people at my company for years. Very aggressive, very persistent. I always assumed he was just another consultant trying to make a connection." That's when I noticed the connection. "Marcus, is it possible that Gerald Foster has someone inside your company? Someone who's been feeding Vivian information about your search for me?" He thought about it. "It's possible. Even likely. He would have needed inside information to track my investigation. I wasn't exactly discreet about looking for my daughter. I thought publicity might help. But the details he seemed to know..." He trailed off, thinking. Yes, he must have a contact. Then we need to find out who that contact is, and we need to find out exactly what Vivian is planning. Marcus nodded slowly. "I have resources, people who can look into this. Investigators, lawyers, forensic accountants." "I am a forensic accountant," I reminded him. "That's what I do. I find the things people try to hide." He looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time. Respect. Recognition. The kind of look one professional gives another when they realize they're dealing with a peer. "Then we'll work together," he said. "What do you want to do?" I took a deep breath. "I want to do more than just find out what Vivian's been planning. I want to expose her, publicly, completely, in a way she can't recover from." "You're angry." "I'm furious." "Good." He smiled, and it was my smile. I recognized it instantly. The slight upturn at the corner of the mouth, the way the eyes crinkled. So am I. We began to plan. The next 11 months were the most intense of my life. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Not my colleagues at work. Not my few friends outside of work. And certainly not Vivian, Derek, or Camille. To the outside world, I was exactly what I had always been. The overlooked stepdaughter, the one who didn't quite fit, the one they could safely ignore. But behind the scenes, I was building a case. Marcus hired a private investigator named Patricia Navarro. She was in her 50s, former FBI, with 20 years of experience and a reputation for being thorough, discreet, and absolutely ruthless. I liked her immediately. The first rule of investigations, Patricia told me at our initial meeting, is patience. Everyone thinks they want quick results. They don't. Quick results mean mistakes. Mistakes mean exposure. Exposure means losing everything. How long will this take? As long as it needs to. But I'm guessing, based on what you've shown me, 6 months minimum, probably closer to a year. She was right. Month 1. The inside man. Patricia's first priority was identifying Gerald Foster's contact at Thornton Industries. It took 3 weeks. His name was Vincent Liu. He was a mid-level manager in the corporate development division, with access to Marcus's calendar, correspondence, and investigation records. He had been with the company for 8 years, long enough to become trusted, not long enough to be untouchable. Patricia had him under surveillance within days. "He's careful," she reported at our first update meeting. Never meets Foster in person. Uses a burner phone for their communications. But he made one mistake. What? He used a company computer to access personal email. IT security flagged it during a routine audit but didn't think much of it at the time. I pulled the logs. She showed me the records. Vincent had been emailing Gerald Foster for over 3 years. Hundreds of messages, documenting Marcus's search for me, his investigation methods, his emotional state. Every piece of information Vivian needed to stay one step ahead. And he had been well paid for it. Bank records, obtained through means I didn't ask about, showed regular deposits into Vincent's accounts from the same offshore shell company that funded Gerald Foster, Crawford Holdings, LLC. Our first link in the chain. Month 2. The paper trail with Vincent identified. We needed to document the full scope of the conspiracy. I took the lead on this part. Financial forensics was my specialty, and this was exactly the kind of puzzle I was trained to solve. I started with the bank records we had already obtained. Vivian's offshore accounts, the shell companies, the wire transfers. Then I expanded outward, pulling threads, following connections, building a map of money movements that stretched back more than a decade. What I found was impressive in its complexity. Vivian had created a network of shell companies. Crawford Holdings was just the beginning. There were at least 6 others, registered in various jurisdictions, all designed to obscure the flow of funds. Money moved from her personal accounts to the shells, from the shells to Gerald Foster, from Gerald Foster to other operatives. It was professional work. Whoever had set it up knew what they were doing. But they hadn't counted on someone like me. Every shell company leaves traces. Every wire transfer has a record somewhere. Every attempt to hide money creates paperwork that exists in multiple places. I found it all. By the end of month 2, I had documented over $600,000 in payments from Vivian to Gerald Foster and his associates over the past 15 years. I had traced the money through 4 different countries and 7 different financial institutions. I had identified every shell company, every account, every transfer. The paper trail was complete. Month 3. The forgeries, the property documents were next. Richard had been right. The signatures on the liens against his home were forged. But we needed expert verification to make that evidence usable. Marcus brought in a forensic document examiner named Dr. Helena Torres. She had testified in over 100 federal cases and had literally written the textbook on signature analysis. I gave her the documents. 3 days later, she gave me her report. "These signatures are unquestionably forged," she said. "The formation characteristics are wrong. The pressure patterns are inconsistent. The baseline drift is artificial. I can say with complete confidence that Richard Ashford did not sign these documents. Can you identify who did? Signature comparison analysis isn't like fingerprinting. We can't definitively match a forgery to a specific person. But I can tell you that whoever did this had extensive access to Mr. Ashford's authentic signatures. They studied them carefully. They practiced. Someone in the household. Almost certainly. Evidence drop 2. Documented forgery. Expert verified. Month 4. The fraudulent loans. Derek's loan applications required a different approach. Under federal law, making false statements to a financial institution is a felony. Each fraudulent application was potentially 5 to 30 years in prison. But to make those charges stick, we needed to document the fraud comprehensively. Patricia coordinated with contacts at 3 different banks, not Thornton's subsidiaries, to avoid any appearance of impropriety. to obtain copies of Derek's applications and supporting documents. What we found was damning. On one application, Derek had claimed ownership of real estate properties that were actually held in Vivian's name. On another, he had listed employment at a company that had never heard of him. On a third, he had provided references from individuals who, when contacted, denied ever meeting him. 3 counts of federal bank fraud. Minimum. But we weren't done. Digging deeper into Derek's finances, Patricia discovered something else. A pattern of investment schemes targeting elderly victims. Promise of guaranteed returns, request for upfront investment, disappearance of funds. At least 12 victims over 5 years. Combined losses of over $400,000. Derek wasn't just a fraud. He was a serial predator. Evidence drop 3, federal crimes, multiple counts, documented. Month 5, the surveillance network. Camille's role in the conspiracy was the hardest to pin down. She was clearly involved. The text messages Richard had collected proved that. But the extent of her participation was unclear. Was she an active conspirator, or just an unwitting tool of her mother? Patricia set up surveillance. We didn't tap her phone. That would have been illegal. But we did track her movements, document her meetings, photograph her contacts. The picture that emerged was not flattering. Camille met with Gerald Foster at least twice a month. The meetings were always in public places, coffee shops, restaurants, parks, but always the same pattern. She would talk, he would take notes, she would leave. She was reporting on me. Every time we had a conversation, every time I shared something about my life, every observation she made about my emotional state, all of it was going back to Gerald Foster. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the payments. Camille had her own account at Crawford Holdings, LLC. Regular deposits, averaging $2,000 per month, going back at least 3 years. She wasn't just a spy. She was a paid spy. Her own stepsister. Evidence drop 4. Conspiracy, documented payments, ongoing surveillance. Month 6. The real plan. 6 months into our investigation, we finally uncovered what Vivian was really planning. Gerald Foster had been careless. He had used a personal email account for some of his communications, not the burner phone, not the encrypted systems he used for most of his work. And Patricia had obtained access through means I deliberately didn't ask about. What we found changed everything. Via timeline update. Our contact at Thornton confirms the principal is preparing to go public with the daughter search. Media campaign planned for Q2. If we don't act first, we lose control of the narrative. Recommend the following. 1. Accelerate the reconciliation with the subject. Position Mrs. A as the supportive stepmother who helped facilitate the reunion. 2. Establish legal framework for financial involvement. Suggest updating the subject's emergency contacts, beneficiary designations, etc., to include Mrs. A3. Once the Thornton connection is public, Mrs. A approaches the principal directly. Present herself as the loving stepmother who raised his daughter. Request fair compensation for decades of care. 4. If the principal is reluctant, suggest the subject could be convinced to share inheritance. Mrs. A has established influence, could be leveraged. 5. Fallback option. If the subject becomes uncooperative, we have enough documented dirt to create a public relations problem for Thornton. A troubled daughter could be embarrassing. Negotiate quietly. Budget for Phase 3 attached. Recommend immediate approval. Gee, I read that email 5 times, each time feeling the fury build a little more. fair compensation, established influence, documented dirt. They weren't just planning to exploit my relationship with Marcus. They were prepared to blackmail us both. Evidence drop 5. Conspiracy to commit extortion, documented in writing. Month 7. The counter-offensive. Now that we knew Vivian's plan, we could design our counterattack. Marcus's legal team joined our planning sessions. There were 4 of them, 3 attorneys and a legal strategist, all bound by confidentiality agreements and all very, very good at their jobs. Here's the situation, Marcus said at our first joint meeting. We have evidence of fraud, forgery, conspiracy, bank fraud, and potential extortion. We have documented payments, surveillance records, and a clear pattern of criminal activity. The question is how to use it, the lead attorney, a woman named Catherine Chen, said. If we go to law enforcement now, they'll investigate. Charges might be filed, but the process will be slow, and there's no guarantee of conviction. Month 9. The reunion plan. Vivian moved fast once she thought she had an opening. Within 2 weeks of our reconciliation lunch, she had proposed the family reunion. A chance for healing, she called it. A way to bring everyone together. What she really meant was a public stage for her grand performance. She wanted to introduce me to Marcus Thornton at the reunion, to position herself as the loving stepmother who had facilitated this miraculous connection, to establish herself publicly and permanently as an essential part of the story. What she didn't know was that Marcus and I had been planning this reunion for months. The venue was his estate. The guest list was partly ours. The security cameras and audio recording systems were already installed. She thought she was setting the stage. We were setting the trap. Month 10. The final preparations. 4 weeks before the reunion, we held our final planning session. The team had grown. Marcus, Patricia, Catherine Chen, and her legal team. 2 FBI agents who had been quietly briefed on the case, and a forensic technology specialist who had helped design our recording systems. Here's the sequence, I said, standing at a whiteboard covered with timelines and flowcharts. Vivian will arrive at the reunion believing she's in control. She'll spend the first hour or 2 establishing dominance, treating me as the help, demonstrating her position in the family hierarchy. We'll record all of that, Patricia added. Every slight, every insult, every demonstration of the dynamic she's created. Then she'll make her move. She'll call the room to attention and announce that she has wonderful news about my biological father. She'll reveal the Thornton connection and offer to help facilitate a meeting. And that's when Marcus arrives, Catherine said. Exactly. Unannounced. Unexpected. He walks in, hugs me like he's known me for months, because he has, and everything Vivian thought she was building falls apart. What happens then? One of the FBI agents asked. Then she panics. She starts asking questions, making accusations, revealing things she shouldn't reveal. And we record all of that too. And then you confront her with the evidence. Document by document, in front of witnesses, on camera, with FBI agents standing by. She's going to deny everything. Of course she is. But we have the paper trail, the expert testimony, the witness statements. We have 15 years of documentation. She can deny all she wants. The evidence will speak for itself. Marcus spoke up. What about Derek and Camille? They'll follow their mother's lead. They always do. When she panics, they'll panic. And when they panic, they'll make mistakes. You're certain of this? I thought about 22 years of watching this family operate. 22 years of being dismissed, overlooked, underestimated. 22 years of learning their patterns, their weaknesses, their pressure points. I'm certain. Month 11. The night before, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, running through the plan again and again. Every contingency, every variable, every possible way things could go wrong. Around 3 a.m., I gave up and started reviewing the evidence one more time. 47 documents from Richard's lockbox. Hundreds more that Patricia had gathered over the past year. Bank records, emails, surveillance reports, expert testimony. It was overwhelming in its completeness. But was it enough? I thought about my father, about Richard, the man who had raised me, who had loved me, who had protected me as best he could. He had known what Vivian was. He had spent years collecting evidence against her. But he had never been able to act. Why? Fear, probably. Fear of conflict, fear of consequences, fear of losing what little stability he had managed to create, fear of being wrong, fear of being right. I understood that fear now. I felt it myself, coiling in my stomach, whispering that maybe I should let this go. Maybe I should walk away. Maybe I should just accept my inheritance and disappear and forget about revenge. But then I thought about the funeral, the catering deliveries, the garage, standing alone while 200 people mourned my father, and I was sent to check boxes. No, I was done being afraid. Tomorrow, everything would change. The morning of the reunion was beautiful. Clear skies, crisp air, the kind of Pacific Northwest autumn day that makes you remember why people put up with all the rain. The Thornton estate looked stunning. 20 acres of manicured grounds, the main house gleaming in the morning light, the ballroom prepared for 200 guests. I arrived early, as planned. Marcus was already there, waiting in the private room where he would stay until his dramatic entrance. "How are you feeling?" he asked. Terrified, exhilarated, ready. All appropriate emotions. He smiled. "Eleanor, whatever happens today, I want you to know that I'm proud of you. Your mother would be proud too." I felt tears prick at my eyes, but I blinked them away. There would be time for tears later. "Thank you for everything. You did this yourself. I just provided resources. You provided more than that. You gave me a family, a real one." He pulled me into a hug, the second time he'd ever hugged me. The first had been at our initial meeting, after 4 hours of talking, after 33 years of separation. "Let's go finish this," he said. I nodded. "Let's go finish this." Guests started arriving around 2 p.m. I positioned myself near the entrance, playing my role one last time. The dutiful stepdaughter, the helpful family member, the one who didn't quite fit. I greeted arrivals, directed them to the coat check, answered questions about the facilities. Every time someone asked who I was, I gave the same response. "I'm Eleanor, Richard's daughter. I'm just helping out." Some of the guests nodded sympathetically. Others didn't notice me at all. Perfect. Vivian arrived at 2:30. She looked magnificent. Designer dress, professional makeup, every hair in place. She swept through the entrance like she owned the place, Derek and Camille flanking her like bodyguards. "Eleanor!" She came toward me, arms extended, voice pitched to carry. "You look lovely, dear. So glad you could help with the arrangements." "Of course," I said, accepting her air kiss. "That's what family is for. Isn't it wonderful? All these people gathered together, and such a beautiful venue. The Thornton Foundation really came through, didn't they? Such a generous organization." She smiled her public smile. I've been thinking, Eleanor, about what we discussed, about your biological father. Here it came. I was thinking, she continued, linking her arm through mine as if we were the best of friends, that today might be the perfect opportunity to, well, to reach out to him. I have contact information. I could make the introduction. At the reunion? Why not? He's very interested in meeting you, I'm told. And what better setting than a family event? It would be so meaningful. I pretended to consider this. Do you really think he'd come? I think he might, if you asked. If I reached out on your behalf. Then let's do it, I said. Let's reach out right now. Vivian's smile widened. She thought she was winning. I'll make some calls, she said. Wait here. She swept away, already pulling out her phone, already composing the performance in her head. I watched her go, then I checked my own phone. Marcus had sent a text 5 minutes ago. In position. Waiting for your signal. I typed back, ready when you are. The trap was set. The next 2 hours were a masterclass in performance. Vivian worked the room like a professional. She greeted guests, shared memories of Richard, accepted condolences with graceful grief. Every movement was calculated. Every word was perfectly chosen. And throughout it all, she made sure to position me as the help. Eleanor, could you check on the appetizers? I think we're running low. Eleanor, Mrs. Henderson's coat seems to have been misplaced. Could you sort that out? Eleanor, the florist is here with a question. Could you handle it? Every request was reasonable on its own, but taken together, they painted a picture. Eleanor is the assistant. Eleanor does the work. Eleanor doesn't quite belong at the main event. The guests absorbed this message without even realizing it. When Derek handed me his empty champagne glass and said, "Be a dear and fetch me another, would you?" Nobody thought it was strange. When Camille snapped her fingers to get my attention from across the room, nobody blinked. When a distant relative asked Vivian who I was, and she replied, "Oh, that's just Eleanor. She's helping with the event," the relative nodded and moved on. Through all of it, I stayed calm. I followed directions. I played my part. And the cameras recorded everything. At 4:45 p.m., Vivian called the room to attention. She stood at the front of the ballroom, near the massive windows that overlooked the estate's gardens. The late afternoon light caught her just right. She had probably planned that too. "Everyone, please, if I could have your attention for a moment." 200 faces turned toward her. Conversations died away. The room went quiet. Thank you all for being here today. It means more than I can say to see so many of Richard's friends and family gathered in his memory. She paused, allowing a moment of silence for the dead. As many of you know, today isn't just about mourning. It's about celebration. It's about healing. It's about bringing family together and building bridges to the future. Another pause. Vivian knew how to work a room. Some of you may not know Eleanor very well. She's Richard's daughter from his first marriage. She and I have had our differences over the years. Families are complicated, aren't they? But recently, we've grown closer. We've found a new understanding. She gestured for me to join her at the front of the room. I walked forward slowly, feeling every eye on me. My heart was pounding, but I kept my face calm, submissive, appropriately grateful. I've recently learned something, Vivian continued, taking my hand in hers with theatrical warmth. That changes everything. Something about Eleanor's past. Something wonderful. She paused for effect. Classic Vivian. Eleanor has a connection to a very important family in this community. A family that has been searching for her for years, and I believe with all my heart, that it's time to help them find each other. Another pause. The room was wrapped. Eleanor's biological father, Vivian announced, is Marcus Thornton, the Marcus Thornton, and I've arranged for him to be here today. A murmur went through the crowd. The Thornton name carried weight. Everyone knew who he was. Vivian squeezed my hand, playing the supportive stepmother to perfection. "I know this must be overwhelming," she said to me, loud enough for everyone to hear. "But I want you to know that I'll be here for you. We'll face this together, as a family." She was laying it on thick. The cameras were capturing every word. I opened my mouth to respond, to continue the performance, to express appropriate gratitude. But I didn't get the chance, because that's when the doors at the back of the ballroom opened, and Marcus Thornton walked in. Time seemed to slow down as Marcus crossed the ballroom floor. 200 guests turned to watch him. The man himself, tall, silver-haired, unmistakable. Even people who didn't know him personally recognized the aura of power and wealth that surrounded him. He walked with purpose, with intention, with the confidence of a man who knew exactly what he was doing. And he walked right past Vivian. He walked directly to me, and he pulled me into a hug. Not a polite social hug. Not the careful embrace of strangers meeting for the first time. This was a real hug, a father's hug. The kind of hug that communicated love, relief, and joy all at once. "Eleanor," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I'm so sorry it took this long." The room went completely silent. Vivian's champagne glass slipped from her fingers. It bounced on the carpet, spilling its contents, but she didn't seem to notice. She was staring at us with an expression of dawning horror. I hugged Marcus back, feeling tears on my cheeks. Real tears. This part wasn't performance. "I know, Dad. I know." Dad. The word landed like a bomb. I felt the room shift around us. 200 people were reassessing everything they had just witnessed. The interactions, the dynamics, the way I had been treated all afternoon. "I don't understand," Vivian stammered. "Eleanor, what is this? When did you—" I pulled back from the hug, but kept my hand in Marcus's. I turned to face my stepfamily, Vivian, Derek, Camille, all three of them frozen in various states of confusion and fear. "Vivian," I said, "this is my biological father, the man whose estate we're standing in right now. But I was going to introduce you. You arranged nothing. Marcus and I have been in contact for almost a year. Since before you and I had our reconciliation lunch. Since before you graciously offered to help me find my biological father." Understanding was dawning in her eyes now. Terrible understanding. "The Thornton Foundation didn't fund this reunion because you applied," I continued. "The foundation funded it because I approved it, because I sit on the board, because Marcus and I have been planning this event for months." That's impossible." "Is it? Is it impossible that the woman you've been treating like a servant for 22 years might have had more going on than you realized?" Vivian's composure was cracking. I could see it in her eyes, in the slight tremor of her hands, in the way her voice had lost its smooth confidence. "This is some kind of trick." "No, Vivian, this is consequences. 22 years of consequences, finally arriving." Derek stepped forward, his face red with anger and confusion. "This is entrapment. You lured us here. You set us up." "I set you up." I shook my head. "Derek, Vivian planned this reunion. She chose this venue. She designed the event where she would heroically introduce me to my biological father and position herself as the essential intermediary. All I did was let her execute her own plan. You knew about us, Camille whispered. You knew what we were doing. I looked at my stepsister, the woman who had smiled at me while reporting my emotional state to Gerald Foster, the woman who had accepted $2,000 a month to spy on her own family. Yes, Camille. I knew. I know about your reports to Gerald Foster. I know about your account at Crawford Holdings. I know exactly what role you played in all of this. Her face crumpled. I didn't. Mom said. She said we were just keeping an eye on you. You were surveilling me. For years, every conversation we had, every moment of apparent kindness, it was all going into a file, all being used to plan how to exploit me. That's not fair. Fair. I laughed. It wasn't a kind sound. You want to talk about fair, Camille? Was it fair when you excluded me from your wedding party because I would throw off the aesthetic? Was it fair when you told everyone I was difficult while you were secretly reporting my every move? She had no response. Just tears, real tears for once, streaming down her face. I turned back to Vivian. It's over, I said. All of it. The schemes, the surveillance, the plans to manage my relationship with Marcus. Over. You don't understand what you're doing, Vivian hissed. You're destroying this family. No, I'm exposing what this family has always been. What you made it. I nodded to Patricia Navarro, who had been standing unobtrusively near the side entrance. She stepped forward with a thick folder and handed it to me. Let me explain to everyone what's actually happening here, I said, holding up the folder. This contains documentation of Vivian's activities over the past 15 years. Bank records, property documents, emails, contracts. Those are private. You had no right. They're evidence of fraud, forgery, and conspiracy, Vivian. Let me walk you through it. I opened the folder and removed the first document. Analytique secrète. This is a bank statement showing a wire transfer of $50,000 from an account registered to Crawford Holdings, LLC, that's Vivian's shell company, to Gerald Foster's consulting firm. The memo line says consulting services, but this is what Gerald was actually doing. I held up another document. This is an email from Gerald Foster to Vivian, dated 6 months ago, discussing strategies for establishing access to Thornton-related assets through the subject, Eleanor Ashford. In other words, how to exploit me. Another document. This is a sworn statement from a former employee of Foster's firm, confirming that Gerald was paid specifically to investigate my connection to Marcus Thornton and to help Vivian position herself as an intermediary. Vivian's composure was cracking. These could be fabricated. Anyone could. These documents have been authenticated by forensic accountants and verified by independent investigators. They've also been reviewed by the FBI. That stopped her cold. The FBI? Wire fraud, bank fraud, conspiracy. These are federal crimes, Vivian. The agents I've been working with for the past 6 months have found your case very interesting. I gestured to 2 men in suits who had been standing quietly near the back of the room. They stepped forward, badges visible. Mrs. Ashford, one of them said, we'd like to ask you some questions. For the first time, I saw real fear in Vivian's eyes. This is ridiculous. I need to speak with my attorney. Of course, you have that right. But before you go, let me finish showing everyone what you've done. I turned to face the crowd. 200 witnesses, all watching in stunned silence. Vivian married my father 22 years ago, I said. She married him because she believed there was Thornton money somewhere in his past. Money connected to my biological mother's relationship with Marcus Thornton. For over a decade, she's been investigating that connection, hiring private investigators, paying informants, building a file on me. I held up more documents. During that time, she also committed significant financial fraud. She transferred over $340,000 from my father's accounts to her personal holdings. She put liens on his property using forged signatures. She created shell companies to hide the flow of funds. I looked at Vivian, and she paid her daughter to spy on me. Camille made a small sound, somewhere between a sob and a gasp. The plan was simple, I continued. Once my connection to Marcus became public, Vivian would position herself as the supportive stepmother who had facilitated the reunion. She would then approach Marcus, either directly or through me, and request compensation for her years of care. If that didn't work, she was prepared to use documented dirt to create problems for the Thornton family. I held up the email that had laid out the entire scheme. This is their plan, in their own words. If the principal is reluctant, suggest the subject could be convinced to share inheritance. Mrs. A has established influence, could be leveraged. And in case that didn't work, we have enough documented dirt to create a public relations problem for Thornton. A troubled daughter could be embarrassing. I looked at Vivian. You were planning to blackmail us, Vivian, to extort money from Marcus by threatening to make me look bad. That's not just fraud. That's conspiracy to commit extortion. That's not, you're twisting. Am I? Let me read the email again. Negotiate quietly. That's the language of blackmail, Vivian, and it's all documented. I closed the folder. That's what this family reunion was really about. Not healing, not celebration, not bringing people together. It was about positioning Vivian for the final phase of a scheme she's been running for 15 years. The room was silent, 200 people processing what they had just witnessed. I'm done now, I said. Vivian, the FBI agents would like to speak with you. Derek, they have questions for you as well. Something about fraudulent loan applications and investment schemes targeting elderly victims. Camille. I paused, looking at my stepsister. I don't know yet how involved you were. That's for investigators to determine. Vivian's face had gone pale. Derek looked like he was about to be sick. Camille was crying openly. This isn't over, Vivian said, her voice low and venomous. You think you've won, but you don't understand. I understand perfectly, I interrupted. I understand that you saw me as a tool, a resource, a means to an end. For 22 years, you treated me like I was nothing. Like I was the janitor at my own father's funeral. Because you were waiting for the moment when you could finally cash in. I stepped closer to her. But you made a mistake, Vivian. You underestimated me. You assumed that because I was quiet, I was weak. Because I didn't fight back, I was beaten. Because I played along with your game, I didn't know the rules. I smiled. I knew the rules better than you did. I've been playing this game for 11 months. And now, I gestured to the room full of witnesses, the FBI agents, the cameras recording everything. Now you've lost. The FBI agents stepped forward. Mrs. Ashford, if you'll come with us, please. The aftermath was chaos. Vivian was escorted out first, refusing to say another word until she had spoken with her attorney. Derek followed, loudly protesting that he had done nothing wrong, that this was all a misunderstanding, that he would sue everyone involved. Camille collapsed into a chair, sobbing. A few guests approached her with uncertain sympathy. She looked pathetic, broken, clearly a victim of something larger than herself. Whether that sympathy would last remained to be seen. The other guests milled about in confused clusters, whispering among themselves. Some looked at me with pity, others with admiration. A few with naked curiosity about what would happen next. Patricia Navarro worked the room, making sure no one left without providing contact information. Some of them would be called as witnesses. All of them had seen something they wouldn't forget. Marcus stayed by my side through all of it. His presence was solid, reassuring, paternal. "That was well done," he said quietly. "Better than I expected. It's not over yet. I know. But the hard part is done, the public part, the part they can't deny, can't spin, can't explain away." I looked across the room to where a cluster of guests were examining the documents I had distributed. Copies of the evidence, spread across a table for anyone who wanted to verify for themselves. "No more secrets," I said. "No more lies. Everyone knows exactly what happened." "Everyone will know," Marcus agreed. "Shaw, this story is going to spread. You can't have 200 witnesses to something like this and expect it to stay quiet." I nodded. That had been part of the plan. Public exposure, permanent record, no possibility of quiet burial. "I need some air," I said. Marcus squeezed my hand. "Take your time. I'll handle things here." I walked out of the ballroom, through the elegant corridors of the Thornton estate, and into the gardens beyond. I found a bench near a fountain, the same fountain Marcus had shown me on my first visit to the estate months ago. The water caught the late afternoon light, creating patterns that shifted and changed with every passing second. I sat down and let myself breathe. For 11 months I had been running on adrenaline and righteous anger. Every day had been focused on the plan, the evidence, the eventual confrontation. I had thought about this moment constantly, imagined it, rehearsed it, refined it in my mind. And now it was done. The performance was over. The trap had sprung. The revelation had been made. And I didn't know what to feel. There was satisfaction, yes. The deep pleasure of watching Vivian's carefully constructed world collapse around her. The vindication of proving that I wasn't what she had always said I was. Weak, difficult, a problem to be managed. But there was grief too. Grief for the family I had never really had. Grief for Richard, who had loved me but couldn't protect me. Grief for the little girl I had been, who had wanted so badly to belong. And there was exhaustion. Bone-deep, soul-deep exhaustion. The kind that comes from carrying something heavy for a very long time and finally being able to set it down. I sat by the fountain until the sun began to set, watching the light change, feeling the weight of the day settle into my bones. Marcus found me an hour later. "The FBI agents have left," he said. "They took Vivian and Derek for questioning. Camille went home with her husband. What happens now?" "Now the legal process begins. Evidence review, grand jury probably. Formal charges, if the U.S. attorney decides to proceed." "Will they?" "Catherine thinks so. The evidence is strong, the crimes are clear, and there's a political advantage to prosecuting financial fraud. It plays well in an election year." I nodded. Politics. Everything was politics in the end. "There's something else," Marcus said. "Something we should discuss." He sat down on the bench beside me. "My will," he said. I turned to look at him. "Your will?" "Eleanor, you're my only child, my only heir. When I die, everything I have will pass to you." The reality of what he was saying settled over me like a heavy blanket. Marcus Thornton was worth more than $400 million, and he was telling me that I would inherit all of it. "I didn't do this for your money," I said. "I didn't even know you were looking for me until after Richard died." "I know. That's why I trust you. But surely there must be other people, charities, organizations." "There are, and they'll be taken care of. But the bulk of my estate will go to you. That's non-negotiable." "Marcus, I've spent 33 years building something," he said. "Building a company, building a fortune, building a legacy. For most of that time, I thought I'd have to leave it to strangers, foundation boards, charitable trusts, people I've never met." He turned to face me. "And then I found you, my daughter. The child I didn't know I had. Raised by another man, turned into someone remarkable despite everything that was done to her." His voice cracked slightly. "I want my legacy to go to you, Eleanor. I want everything I've built to mean something, to matter, to become part of your story." I didn't know what to say. For 33 years, I had been told, directly and indirectly, that I wasn't good enough, that I didn't fit, that I was the burden, the problem, the one who didn't quite belong. And now the most successful man I knew was telling me I was exactly who he wanted. "Okay," I said finally. "I'll try to be worthy of it." "You already are," he said. "You already are." The legal proceedings took 18 months. Vivian was charged with wire fraud, bank fraud, and conspiracy. Her lawyers fought every step of the way, challenging the evidence, claiming improper investigation methods, arguing that Vivian had been manipulated by Gerald Foster. None of it worked. The jury took 4 hours to convict on all counts. The judge gave her 12 years. Derek's case was simpler. The bank fraud charges were straightforward. The investment schemes were well documented. His lawyers tried to argue diminished capacity, some kind of psychological condition that made him incapable of understanding his actions. But the prosecutors presented evidence of meticulous planning that undercut that defense entirely. 8 years. Gerald Foster pleaded guilty to avoid trial. He got 6 years and agreed to cooperate with investigators pursuing other cases. Camille was never charged. The prosecutors determined that she had been a pawn rather than a player, manipulated by her mother, too naive to understand the full scope of what she was participating in. I wasn't sure I believed that, but I also wasn't sure I cared anymore. She wasn't my problem. None of them were my problem. 3 years after the reunion, Marcus Thornton died. It was a stroke. Quick, at least. He was at his desk one morning, reviewing quarterly reports. He never could stay away from the business, even at his age. And by afternoon, he was gone. I held his hand in the hospital room while the machines recorded his final heartbeats. I told him I loved him. I told him I was grateful. I told him I would honor his legacy, his name, his trust in me. I don't know if he heard me. I hope he did. The funeral was enormous. Over 1,000 people attended. Business associates, community leaders, old friends, employees from across the company's history. They all had stories about Marcus. They all wanted to share their memories. I stood at the front of the cathedral and gave the eulogy. "My father," I said, and I meant both of them, Richard and Marcus, the man who raised me and the man who found me. My father taught me that family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by choice, by who shows up for you, by who sees you for who you really are. I looked out at the crowd. Marcus Thornton chose me. He chose to search for me when he didn't have to. He chose to welcome me when he found me. He chose to trust me, support me, believe in me when I was still learning to believe in myself. I paused, feeling the weight of 1,000 eyes. I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that choice. It's been 5 years now since the reunion. I live on the Thornton estate, my estate now, though I've made changes. The formal gardens have been softened with wildflowers. The grand ballroom hosts community events and charity galas. The guest cottages house artists and writers who need space to create. I've tried to make the place feel like home, like something alive. Thornton Industries is thriving. I promoted from within, brought in diverse perspectives, implemented ethical oversight structures that my forensic accounting background made me uniquely qualified to design. The Thornton Foundation has tripled its charitable giving. We focus on programs that support survivors of family trauma, people escaping abusive situations, children who feel invisible in their own homes. It feels right. I got married 2 years ago. His name is James Chen, a public defender I met at a foundation event. He's kind, principled, completely uninterested in my money, and somehow finds my obsessive document organization endearing. We're expecting our first child in the spring. A daughter. I've already decided what I'm going to name her. Sometimes people ask me about the reunion. They want to hear the story, the dramatic reveal, the public humiliation, the satisfying downfall. I tell them the abbreviated version, the part about the hugs and the evidence and the FBI, the part that makes a good story. But I don't tell them everything. I don't tell them about the years of therapy I've needed to process what happened. The nights I still wake up feeling like I'm 12 years old again, trying to be invisible so I won't cause problems. I don't tell them about the anger that still flares up sometimes, directed at people who've done nothing wrong except remind me of someone who did. I don't tell them that vengeance, even justified vengeance, doesn't heal you. It just gives you room to begin healing. That's the work that never ends. Here's what I've learned. The people who underestimate you are showing you something important. They're showing you who they really are. They're revealing their assumptions, their prejudices, their limitations. That information is valuable. Not because you should use it for revenge. I'm not recommending that as a lifestyle choice. But because people who underestimate others make mistakes. They get careless. They reveal themselves in ways they wouldn't if they thought anyone was watching. So watch. Pay attention. And when you're ready, when you have the evidence, the allies, the opportunity, act. Not for vengeance, not for satisfaction, but for yourself, for the person you deserve to become, for the life you deserve to live. That's what I learned in those 11 months of planning. That's what I carry with me now. The best revenge isn't public humiliation. It isn't watching your enemies fall. It isn't the satisfaction of proving them wrong. The best revenge is becoming the person they said you could never be, and then living that life, fully and completely, without needing their permission. I visit Richard's grave sometimes. I tell him about Marcus, about James, about the baby on the way. I tell him about the company, the foundation, the life I've built. I tell him I understand now. Why he kept the secret. Why he couldn't confront Vivian. Why he spent years collecting evidence he never used. He was afraid. He was tired. He was doing the best he could with what he had. I don't blame him anymore. I just wish he could have seen how it all turned out. I think he would be proud. Last year, I received a letter from the federal prison where Vivian is serving her sentence. It was 3 pages long, handwritten, full of apologies, explanations, requests for forgiveness. I read it twice. Then I put it in a drawer and never looked at it again. Some bridges don't need rebuilding. Some relationships aren't worth repairing. Some people have used up all their chances. That might sound harsh. Maybe it is. But I've learned, over these past 5 years, that I don't owe anyone access to my life. Not even the people who raised me. Not even the people who share my name. Family isn't defined by biology or legal documents. Family is defined by choice. And I choose the people who choose me. The baby kicks sometimes while I'm sitting in the garden, looking out at the fountain where Marcus and I talked after the reunion. I put my hand on my stomach and feel that flutter of movement. My daughter. She'll never know her grandmother Vivian. She'll never meet her Uncle Derek or her Aunt Camille. That part of my history will be stories I tell her, if I tell her anything at all. But she'll know Marcus. She'll know Richard. She'll know the 2 fathers who loved me, one who raised me, one who found me, and the legacy they left behind. And I'll make sure she knows something else, too. I'll make sure she knows her own value, not because of her name or her inheritance or her family connections, but because of who she is. I'll make sure she never feels invisible in her own home. I'll make sure she knows that she matters, that she belongs, that she is enough, exactly as she is. That's the inheritance I want to leave her. That's the legacy that matters most. If you've stayed with me this long, thank you. I know this story was long. I know it had a lot of twists, a lot of documents, a lot of waiting, but I think it's important. Not because of the revenge or the money or the dramatic reveals. It's important because it's true. Not every detail, maybe. Names changed, timelines adjusted, some scenes combined for clarity. But the heart of it is real. The girl who felt invisible for 22 years. The discovery that changed everything. The choice to fight back with evidence instead of emotion. The long, patient work of building a case that couldn't be denied. That's my story. And if you've ever felt the way I felt, if you've ever been the one they overlook, the one they dismiss, the one they treat like you don't matter, I hope my story gives you something. Not a blueprint for revenge. That's not the point. But maybe hope. Maybe the belief that things can change. Maybe the knowledge that you're not alone. You matter, you belong, you deserve better. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, the people who underestimate you give you exactly what you need to prove them wrong. If this story meant something to you, I'd love to hear about it. Leave a comment sharing your own experience with people who underestimated you. What did you learn? How did you move forward? And if you're in the middle of your own story right now, if you're still waiting, still gathering strength, still trying to figure out your next move, remember this. The fact that they don't see you is your advantage. Use it wisely. And when you're ready to move with precision. Eleanor Thornton is the CEO of Thornton Industries and the founder of the Sarah Ashford Foundation, which supports survivors of family trauma. She lives in Seattle with her husband James and their daughter Sarah. She has never spoken to her stepfamily since the trial, and she has no plans to change that. Sarah is 4 years old now. She has my eyes, Marcus's eyes, and her father's sense of humor. She loves dinosaurs, the color purple, and absolutely refusing to go to bed on time. She also has opinions, so many opinions, about everything. Yesterday, she informed me that dinosaurs were actually still alive, but they were hiding because people are too loud and it hurts their ears. She might be onto something. This morning, I took her to the cemetery where Richard is buried. I don't do this often. It feels strange bringing a child to a graveyard, but I wanted her to see it, to understand, at least a little, where she comes from. "Who's that?" she asked, pointing at the headstone. "That's my dad," I said. "Your Grandpa Richard." Is he sleeping? In a way, he's resting. She considered this for a moment, with the intensity that 4-year-olds bring to important questions. Did he love you? Very much. Why isn't he here? Because sometimes people can't stay, even when they want to. But the love they leave behind, that stays forever. She nodded, accepting this with the easy grace of childhood. Then she looked around the cemetery, at the rows of headstones stretching into the distance. There are a lot of people resting here. There are. Who visits them? The people who love them. The people who remember them. She thought about this for a moment longer. Then she turned to me with complete confidence. When I'm big, I'll come visit Grandpa Richard, so he knows he's not alone. I had to turn away so she wouldn't see my tears. The Thornton Foundation is hosting its annual gala next month. We're expecting 500 guests, and we're hoping to raise $3 million for our family trauma programs. The keynote speaker is a woman named Maria, the same Maria who approached me after a gala 5 years ago, who told me my story gave her courage. She's 24 now. She has a degree in social work and runs one of our satellite programs in Portland. She's remarkable. When I asked her to give the keynote, she hesitated. I'm not sure I'm the right person, she said. I'm not famous. I haven't done anything that impressive. You survived something impossible, I told her. And then you turned around and started helping other people survive. That's the most impressive thing I know. She's still nervous, but she's going to do it. That's what courage looks like. James came home late last night. Big case. He's defending a young man accused of a crime that James is certain he didn't commit. The evidence is circumstantial, the prosecution is aggressive, and the system is not designed to be fair. He won't give up, though. He never does. We sat in the kitchen after Sarah was asleep, too tired to do anything but hold hands across the table. Do you ever wonder, he said, what would have happened if things had gone differently? If you'd never found out about Marcus? If Vivian had gotten away with it? I thought about it. Sometimes, late at night, I imagine all the ways it could have gone wrong. Does it scare you? Not anymore. I used to be terrified of what-ifs. Now I just feel grateful for what is. He squeezed my hand. I'm glad I found you, he said. You didn't find me? I was already here. You just had the good sense to notice. He laughed. That warm, genuine laugh that I fell in love with. True. Very true. It's morning now. Sarah is in the garden chasing butterflies with the determined intensity of a professional hunter. James is making breakfast, badly, with the confidence of a man who believes that love compensates for culinary incompetence. I'm sitting at my desk, looking out at the grounds of the Thornton estate. My estate, watching the light change as the sun climbs higher. 5 years ago, I was invisible. Today, I'm surrounded by people who see me, who love me, who choose me every day. That's the real victory. Not the revenge, not the money, not the dramatic reveals. The real victory is this: a quiet morning, a chaotic breakfast, a child laughing in the garden, a husband burning toast with love, a life I never thought I'd have, a family I chose for myself. To everyone who's still in the hard part, still invisible, still underestimated, still wondering if things will ever change, I want you to know something. Your story isn't over. The people who dismiss you don't get to write the ending. You do. So keep gathering evidence. Keep building strength. Keep paying attention to the people who underestimate you. And when you're ready, when the time is right, make your move. Not for revenge, for yourself, for the life you deserve, for the ending only you can write. Thank you for reading. Stay safe. Stay strong. Stay you. And remember, they thought you were the janitor. They were wrong.